And now, a show with inappropriate language. The Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm interviewing Robin Van Gyn. Robin is a badass in the backcountry and has been a pro rider for over a decade. The crazy part about Robin making it is that she didn't even start snowboarding until she was 16 years old. And this week, the format of the show is a little bit different. I thought I'd switch it up and bring the heaviest topic I had for the interview and drop that first. It's always strange starting with a topic like gender when you're interviewing someone you don't know at all. Robin is the first woman I've had on in a while. Yes, I know I suck. But know that I'm working on getting more women into the show mix. They just have to be a worthy guest. While I talk a lot about gender with the women I have on the show, there have been so few that I feel like I'm almost part of the problem. And I'm going to work on changing that, as there are a lot of badass women out there, and a lot of them have different experiences than us men. And it's interesting for us to get a real perspective on what women are experiencing in snowboarding. Before we get into the podcast, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram at The Powell Movement, sign up for my number 2's letter on my website, and reach out to me if you have anything you want to share. My email is mike@thepowellmovement, and I will get back to you. Finally, I need to thank my show sponsors who make things happen. They are Evo, Rescue Water, Outdoor Research, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. In some of the ads, you will find some discount codes that you can use to buy stuff you're going to need for the season. Please use them. Now, let's talk to Robin Van Gyn. With these podcasts, I usually jump into a bunch of fluff. I will start with, what have you been up to lately? And then we jump into your childhood. But I've done that for almost 100 episodes now. And really, there are some issues that I'd like to talk to you about. And usually they'd work themselves out in the podcast. But I think we're going to start early with them. And I guess the first question would be, what does a token female mean to you?
Oh, wow, we really are getting into it. Okay,
not fucking around.
I got a strong coffee here. Token female, to me, it's very subjective, but it basically, in at least the snowboard realm, we have this thing where in a video or on a team, the brand or the director, producer, whatever, will have a whole roster of guys, males, and they'll have one female, and it's called the token female. And basically, it's not a bad thing. We want to be involved also, and I think that's the part of my journey, is just to help further the inclusion of women in general, and it's working, which is good. But it's also the thing where once they have one female, they kind of wave this flag that says, oh, we have a female, we're doing it, which to me isn't good enough. I understand at sometimes where they're coming from, where they're including us because we deserve to be there. But also sometimes they're including us just to wave the flag.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing to decipher between. When I filmed with Depth Perception, Travis made it very clear to me that he wasn't having a token female. He actually explained it in a sense where I deserved to be there, and that's why I was there.
Question with that.
Okay.
You and Travis have different sponsors, but Roxy, and it's all kind of the same family of brands. Was there any push from the brand side to have you in his movie, or is this purely a decision on his part?
No, he pitched the movie with me in the cast before it actually got picked up by Quicksilver.
So that's got to mean a lot to you.
Oh, definitely. In Brain Farm, when they did That's It, That's All, I think it was, or maybe the fourth phase, Travis actually pushed really, really hard to have a female involved. It wasn't me. It was a different female. I actually don't know who it was. And this info came to me like later down the road. That Brain Farm just said, no, we're not ready to do that. And it wasn't because the person wasn't good enough. They were like, we just can't do it right now or whatever. But I know that he was pushing for that and it didn't happen, but he stuck to his guns, and later down the road it did happen, which is an amazing thing.
You've done a lot of all women's projects, and really, when I think about it now, In calling a project an all-women's project, I don't know if there's an advantage to that. I feel like it just should be a snowboard movie, and these are the people that are in it. You don't have to claim it's all women's.
I completely agree. And I think there's been a shift in my own perspective from when I started snowboarding. I did a lot of women's only projects, and we were kind of like, yeah, we're like over here. But when I think about it now, in the last few years, this has kind of been the shift change for me. Is I want to not move away from that, but I definitely want to realize that it's not about us being over here doing this thing. And at some points, it doesn't help further the equality movement. Like, it should just be a snowboard movie that includes women and men. And there's no like, hey, we have a woman. Like, it's just, they're snowboarding. Like, who cares? Let's stop doing that. We just want to be part of the human race. I no longer want to think of myself as a woman versus a man, even though I do identify as being a woman.
Right.
And I'm pretty feminine. Like, that's who I am. I can admit that. But I want to just be a human who snowboards and not be a woman over here. However, there is another thing at play. And I had a really good conversation this weekend about it, actually, because I met a girl who does a all women's surf mag. And the thing is the all women's film or the all women's magazine or whatever it is, it comes from a need for the space to express ourselves. So it's not necessarily out of, okay, you guys aren't going to include me, I'm going to do this. But it comes out of the need where if we aren't being included, and I'll be clear about that because I have been.
Right.
So I don't want to be like, I'm not being included. I am being included. But if somebody is trying to express themselves in whatever sport or whatever art or whatever they're doing, education, professionals, across the board, if they're not being included in something, they need to find a place for their voice. And the all women's magazine or project comes from a place where this is where they have the space to express themselves when they aren't being included over here. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. When you say women's magazines, I can totally see that with women's magazines, you can have women's products that are advertised to women and men never need to look at it. But with an all-women snowboard movie, given years back, yeah, you might have needed to create that property because you weren't being included. But today, an all-women snowboard movie isn't just selling to women, because I think all snowboarding sells to everyone. It isn't men's or women's snowboarding. It's snowboarding in general.
Yeah. Like this morning, I woke up, I watched Desiree Melançon's new Fait Accompli. It's like a short film that she made. And the one thing I really loved about it was just snowboarding, men, women, everybody together. And to me, it was just a snowboard film. It wasn't a women's snowboard film. I love that. I'm like, yes, this is a really cool thing. But then again, on the other side of the spectrum, we have Jess Camara, who made The Uninvited. And The Uninvited really explains that problem that I'm talking about. It wasn't that she wanted to go out and make an all-women snowboard film. This project came from a place where these other women she was working with and she was seeing, they weren't having the opportunity to express themselves and to get media. So she took it upon herself to help them do that. And I think that's a really amazing thing. So I think when we think about all women's projects, I think the perspective needs to be just a little bit broader. It's not that we're trying to be over here in our own little corner. It's just that sometimes not everyone is included, and we all have the need to express ourselves in whatever we do. And that's what that comes from. It's a product of that. But I do feel like right now I'm seeing across the board a lot of inclusion, and I am so refreshed to see that, because for a while there it was like you could open a snowboard mag and you might be lucky to see a shot of a woman. You might be like, oh God, there's like one photo. And now we're seeing a lot. It's more of like us as humans being a little bit more decent and being like, we're all in this together. I want to snowboard with guys. I want to snowboard with girls. I just want to snowboard with people I have fun with, like that's the bottom line.
I think maybe years back when all the magazines just wanted to show gnarly stuff and big stuff, you could look at the fundamental difference between men and women. There is a physiological difference. And based on body type, men seem to have more power, maybe a little more amplitude and bigger tricks. But then you see Anna Gasser do a triple yesterday and you're like, well, that might throw that theory out the window. But there's a lot attributed to body type. But body type is one part of it. But in terms of style and marketability, that shit doesn't matter at all.
No, and it's actually, we bring something different to the table, like you can watch Manuel Diaz ride a line in Alaska and it's like hard hitting, fast, like super gnar. And there is a place for that. And then you see somebody like myself or like Leanne or whoever riding a line and there's a feminine flow to it. And it's just a different feel. It's not that it's better or worse. It's just a different style and flow. And I think that is being more appreciated across the board in sports, not only the super gnarly, like huge line where we went riding down a huge Alaskan face and you do a 720 off a kicker midway down and you land. But then there's also just something aesthetically really beautiful and flowy that you can be like, oh, that's really cool. It's not super gnarly. Doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, but it looks great. People can relate to that also. They're like, oh, this is just a beautiful shot.
I want to translate it all to board sales too, because one thing that you have to look at is with these brands and magazines, if 98% of snowboarders are men, then I can see where there's not as much inclusion with women because people are looking at the bottom line. But 40% or 45% of snowboarders are women, and I would say 80% of the paid professionals are men. And do you see that skew in sponsored pros based on gender and then look at the sales and be like, what the fuck?
Oh, definitely. I feel like I'm the queen of what the fuck.
Great to have on the podcast.
I am outspoken about it. I don't know if you listened to my speech at the Transworld Awards, but it was very long and I told everybody to go get a drink before they sat down.
I lived it. I was there.
Okay, good. Yeah. It's just really important for me. It's all relative, and if what you're saying is true, that 45% of the buyers are women, which that's new information for me.
I found some numbers on the internet. I think it was 42, but then I round up to 45 because that's what I do.
Nice. I like that. We got a slight bias, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
But I think that relatively, when you see that, it sparks a little like irk way down where you're like, okay, we're seeing, and even in the way that athletes are treated from a brand standpoint, or I'm not saying my own, I'm just saying in general, the focus and the pay equity and that kind of thing, there's a very strong imbalance, relatively speaking. Like if we talk about somebody who's like a Shaun White or Mark McMorris, and if we were to actually see the records of what those numbers were like, and then we were to look at somebody like Anna Gasser and we were to compare the two, I think we would see a pretty big gap. And when you look at that relatively, it's wrong.
It happens everywhere in society, unfortunately, and you hear that it's getting better from old white guys.
Yeah.
I will be an old white guy at one point too, but it might be getting a little bit better. But in snowboarding, it's much more clear in snowboarding. I mean, you can open the magazine and see that there's a big discrepancy, and where the rest of the world might be getting a little bit better, snowboarding, I guess, is getting a little bit better as well.
It is.
It's still not where it needs to be. And you're with a brand that is Roxy, that's been with you for a long time. And I look at it as for women by women. Are there men involved in your day-to-day work with Roxy? And I'm sure you're not working with them every day.
I work with them almost every day.
Wow. That's amazing, because I'm sure there's some sponsor relationships where you get a check and a phone call maybe once every other month.
Well, I think that's the big misconception of being a pro snowboarder from the public's point of view, is that we go snowboard, we get a paycheck. That has changed in the time that snowboarding was birthed, and it's a business. We work outside of snowboarding quite a bit, actually quite a lot. There's things like this where I've scheduled this podcast with you, and this is a great opportunity to talk about things, and it's great for sponsors and everything else. I'm just being honest about it.
True.
And at the same time, we have product meetings. I had an hour and a half long product meeting where I was sent all the files. I looked through the whole line. I gave my feedback. I did research for the next season of what I would like to see and what's good, what's bad. That takes time. It's not just the hour and a half meeting. It's the 5 or 6 hours I spent before that looking at design and flaws and strong points and gathering all the info, condensing it into an email, making sure they have the email, then meeting with them. And then on top of that, there's production. As snowboarders, we're our own producers at times. And even if we're working with a production company, like for myself with TGR, we are working together to promote their movie and my role in it and other people's roles in it. And we're working behind the scenes to get funds from the sponsors to make it happen. And it's so much more than just snowboarding. And I'm sorry, I kind of got off track there, but it is important for people to know that we aren't just snowboarding around having fun, which we are doing that as well.
In all of what you're saying, you represent maybe 20 to 30% of the pros who are fully invested in their sponsors, who are going to take that time outside of their phone call to do the research to make sure the product's great, because there are people that do collect a check, go snowboarding, given there's the social aspect in producing content. But it sounds like you're much more professional than a lot of people, because I've dealt with a lot of athletes. I spent 15, 16 years managing athletes, and not many were like yourself in what you just said until it was too late.
Right. But you have to think about also how long I've been a pro snowboarder. It's about longevity. You get out what you put in. Like I have invested time and effort, and it's paid off for me because I work at it. I make sure that I can deal with brands in a professional manner, and it's a partnership. I'm a brand, they're a brand. We partner together and we work and make things. And when you're doing that and doing a good job of it, they want to keep you because you're helping them develop and do all the behind the scenes stuff. And most of the people that I deal with in snowboarding are like that at this point. It wasn't always like that.
But you're a seasoned pro, like you said, and you're the kind of person where when they have a question at Roxy, they know they can email you and they're going to get the email back within a few hours and have the information they want. You don't get that with everybody, and that's a great quality to have. The one thing I do see the difference between men and women is you never see a guy sent on a photo shoot and used as a ski model. Usually they're going to put action into the magazine or the ad. But with women, you sometimes see them used as snowboard models.
I think from people who are in the fashion world, the ways that people buy and the clientele that they're dealing with is very different. They want to see models and people wearing whatever they're promoting. And that's like very across the board an okay thing. And the way that women buy is different than men. I know that, and I can accept that because I'm not the average woman. The way I buy is completely different than somebody else who lives in a city who, is more into fashion and not really into sports. Like they just want to see the product on somebody making it look good. And then they can go, wow, that's a cool jacket or whatever. And then they go buy it. As much as I don't like that, it's the way things work right now. And that does translate in some ways into snowboarding. I think sometimes as a all-female sports brand, people assume that we're doing everything right. And nobody is perfect. No brand is perfect. And I'm proud to be a part of Roxy. And my role within that realm with the brand is to push for better representation, whether it's, hey, like, I know the fashion world works like this, but we're dealing with snowboarding and with women who are active, and the way that they buy is different. And that's my role, is to influence as a snowboarder the brand and say, hey, this is what we should see more of. We should see an ad with a snowboarder doing something awesome and inspiring. And let's forget about the fashion piece for a bit. And I know you need to show the product. Let's show it in a natural setting.
Yeah.
And that's going to be my journey moving forward with them, is using my voice in a positive way with the people that I work with to push for change. And that's what I'm doing.
Okay, well, I am going to take a break to talk about my sponsors.
Okay.
And my first sponsor is Evo, and there is some exciting news going on the Evo front. They are coming to Canada. Yes, they will be in Whistler, Blackcomb. They're opening 5 retail locations. Exciting news for the brand, and it's going to be great for Whistler as well. So now Evo has stores in Denver, Seattle, Portland, and Whistler. If you're not in those cities, you can always find all the great Evo gear over at evo.com. My next sponsor is Rescue Water, and they are all about proactive recovery. What does that mean to you? Well, think of it like this. If you're really tired, you skip the coffee and you grab yourself an energy drink. Well, if you really need to hydrate, like when you're done working out, getting off the mountain, or going to bed after a big night, skip the sports drink and drink a cold Rescue Water. It replaces electrolytes much better than your traditional sports drink, and it's a difference you can really feel. Make Rescue Water work for you by heading over to rescuewater.com, that's RESQ water.com, and save 20% on a 12-pack case by entering the code RESQ water TPM. That's all one word. My next sponsor is Outdoor Research, and I've been wearing their outerwear since I moved to Seattle in 2000 because it works better than anything else on the market. It's developed and tested in the Northwest, so you know it's gear you can trust. OR is committed to improving your experience with exceptional product so you don't have to think about your gear while you're out on your journey. But don't just take my word for it. In this year's Powder Magazine Apparel Guide, there was one brand voted Apparel of the Year. It was Outdoor Research. So when you're shopping for outerwear this winter, get the best. Head on over to outdoorresearch.com and get 15% off your order with the checkout code POWEL, the number 15, all one word, all in caps. Those are my sponsors. And now we're going to start the podcast how I would normally have started the podcast. We got the heavy gender conversation, some photography conversations out of the way. And Life for You starts in Victoria, BC?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Victoria on Vancouver Island.
You come from a family of dentists, I hear?
Yeah, my uncle's a dentist, my father's a dentist, my cousin's a dentist. I'm pretty sure that at some point I wanted to be a dentist so I could follow my dad's footsteps because he's just an amazing guy and has made an incredible life for himself.
Do dentists make as much money in Canada as they do in the US?
I'm not sure, actually. I think it's probably the same. It's a privatized medical field, so it's not covered by any government funding, I don't think, unless people work for the government and they have a plan or something. But no, I think it's a... Yeah.
So childhood was easy growing up? Did you get a car at 16?
No. Actually, I did get a car at 17, but I'm going to be completely honest with you, even though it feels bad, and I think this is my ego being like, oh, I don't want to be a privileged white girl. Guess what? I am.
Oh, I was too.
Yeah, I was a privileged white girl. I got a 1990 Toyota Tercel when I was 16 years old. Yep. And that was my car. I had it all the way through university. But, you know, even coming from a really comfortable family, I was still taught that, you know, I moved out at 17. I moved to Whistler by myself and I worked 2 jobs. I actually moved through a ton of different jobs. And then I moved to Calgary to go to university and I worked 3 jobs through university. It wasn't like I had everything handed to me on a silver plate. I definitely worked for what I have. And my parents were very clear that if I was going to be snowboarding, that was going to be my own endeavor. They would help me with school. They paid for my tuition. That's it. And so I worked jobs so I could pay for books, pay for rent, pay for food. And then on top of that, I worked another job so I could go snowboarding because they made it very clear that if I wanted to do that, that was going to be on my own steam.
And how about dancing? I hear you were really into competitive dancing when you were growing up.
I was. I actually performed on cruise ships at one point.
No way.
Yeah, I was in this like dancing tour group and we performed at Disneyland and we performed in Hawaii on like a cruise ship. It was really funny.
What kind of dancing?
All sorts. I kind of did everything across the board. I was really into musical theater, so singing and dancing at the same time. Hence my love for talking. I love talking.
You're good at it.
Anybody who knows me knows that I'm just like, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's a good thing. I'm not going to pretend like it's not. I like talking, and I like people who talk. But yeah, I tap danced when I worked on that cruise ship. I was like the youngest member of this tour group, and I was like a tap dancing singer.
Are you getting into the mountains and skiing when you're younger? Because I hear snowboarding didn't start till you were like 15 or 16.
Yeah, no, I skied up at Silver Star and at Mount Washington on Vancouver Island, but skiing mostly. And then my family moved to France because my mom's a professor and she did a sabbatical, which is where the university gives you a year of travel. Like you go live somewhere else where they have a university and you study. She was studying phys ed and she did a lot of research. That's what they do at universities. They teach a little bit and then they do research and that kind of thing. So she went and did research in France and she brought my sisters with her. My dad stayed home because he obviously had a business to run and he came every 3 months for 3 weeks. But I went and lived there. So I took a break from skiing when I was about, I guess, 11. And then I just never picked it up back again when I moved back. I just kind of like did whatever. But then the rise of snowboarding started and I started to notice it. And then my friends would be like, hey, let's go to the mountain, you know, when we were old enough to drive, which is 15, 16. And so we would go up to Mount Washington and people were snowboarding. And I was like, oh my God, that looks so cool. You know, and I was skiing and I was like, I think I just need to try this. And so I did. I tried it. And my first day I went up with a couple of guys and they were like, you know, we're not going to wait for you. And I was like, all right, this is it. I remember having like a pep talk. I was like, I got to keep up. It's like, keep up or die, you know? And so I actually to this day don't feel like I've ever sweated so much in my life as that day. And it was so scary. I was basically just going straight down the hill and trying not to fall and like going way beyond the speeds that I should have been going at because I was trying to keep up.
Right.
And I did. It was like I'd always be at the chairlift like a solid minute or two after the group that I was with got down because I was just like working so hard. And I remember just being so bagged. Like I don't think I've ever been that tired or sweated that much in my life.
And wet gloves.
Oh my God. Like Mount Washington alone is like a very wet resort. And then imagine just like sweating so much and you're just like trying to get to the bottom and you're falling and you're like, oh my God. But yeah, that kind of started my snowboard life.
From there on, is it like, hey, I'm going to go buy a snowboard and I'm going to start going every weekend? Does it hit you that fast or does it kind of gradually happen?
No, it hit me that fast. It was like one of those things that I tried and I felt like I was naturally drawn to it and or good at it. And I think that had to do with the fact that I was a dancer and I also did track and field and I also did field hockey and I pretty much did every sport. Like I tried to do everything. As a young person, my parents were really into athletics. And so they were athletic. We were all athletic. And I kind of just had been doing athletics and sports my whole life. So I kind of had a leg up, awareness, body awareness and stuff like that. And I just kind of felt like right away that this was my path. And I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I asked my parents for a snowboard one Christmas and they bought me a Nitro Glide 149. And then I went and I worked this summer job and I got boots and bindings so I could use the board. And then I just was, like trying to go every weekend. And whenever I could, I would just jump on the bandwagon of whoever was going and go up to Mount Washington. The second I graduated, actually 3 days after my graduation ceremony, I picked up all my stuff and I moved to Whistler. My parents were pretty pissed, but that's what I did.
They're dentists and they probably think that the path you need to go on is to go right to college, get your degree, then maybe take a couple years off and then figure it out. But you take a year off right away. Is it just 1 year that you go to Whistler?
No, I go there. I decide that I'm going to be a snowboarder. This is my decision, hard line. I'm like, this is what I'm doing.
And what year are we talking about?
This is the year 2000 is when I moved up there. Dating myself. I'm cool with that. I'm almost 36, just so that's out there in the world.
I date myself nightly.
Yeah. We'll carry on. We'll talk about that later. But I moved to Whistler and I was there for 2 years. So I said I was going to go for the summer. And then I'd already been accepted to the University of Calgary. And I was going to go get my degree there and then, carry on with life. It was a really bad year. It was awful. I think it was 2001. and it was awful year. And everybody was talking about how 1998 was so good and like, can't believe it's so bad. And I'm going, oh man, I really blew it on my 1 year to have like an awesome snowboard life. And I ended up staying another summer, staying another winter, and having a really good winter. And I think it was essential because it really like helped concrete my love for snowboarding powder. And then eventually caved and I was like, yeah, I should go to university. And I did, but I chose University of Calgary because they had an amazing ski and snowboard program. And I knew that I could snowboard in between classes at the Canadian Olympic Park. So that's why I chose that spot.
In between classes, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, because it's down the road. Canadian Olympic Park is down the road. And they had, arguably at the time, one of the best snowboard parks in all of Canada. They had booters and half pipes and rail gardens, and they had the whole deal. They were killing it.
And at this point, that's kind of when you start entering contests, right?
Yeah, I did. I started competing with like the University Ski and Snowboard Club at whatever events they were going to. And I just went and kind of joined in as I do, and it was like, it was do or die for me. It wasn't like I had a plan B. I just knew that this is the way it was going to go. And I invested everything, all of my energy, time into it, especially because I had not gone and done university in a normal sense. I went and did my own path. I knew that this had to work out. So that was a good first step where I was like, okay, I'm actually placing in contests. And then Lake Louise had Superpark, and I met Pat Bridges. Well, actually, I didn't really meet him. Jeff Patterson, who built the park alongside some of the other parks, but the Lake Louise Park, he introduced me to Pat, and he vouched for me. And I remember Pat, it was like one of the scariest moments for me in snowboarding because I didn't really know anybody. I was just emerging onto the scene. Like, people were just starting to like figure out that I was, doing okay. And I got there and Jeff Patterson introduced me to Pat, and Pat's like, yeah, I guess you could ride. Like, he's pretty intimidating when you first meet him, even though he's the biggest sweetie in the industry. And anyway, he kind of was like, okay, fine. And then as I was walking out, I remember being on top of the world, being like, this is it. I'm doing it. This is the coolest thing that's ever happened to me. I'm allowed to ride at Superpark. I think it was Superpark 8. And this was like my moment. I was like, yes, I can't believe it. I'm walking out to the lift and there's Pat and all of the snowboard industry, like literally every team manager, I swear to God. And he's like, if you fall, I'm going to tap you out. And it was like this super high to the most ultimate low. I turned around and kept walking, but I was like crying under my goggles. And I was just like, oh my, like, imagine that pressure.
Yeah, really.
You're like, oh, fuck. But eventually I just kind of avoided Pat because I was like, okay, so I have to avoid him because I am going to fall. If I'm going to try anything, I'm going to fall. So I went up and I really put it out there. I like hit all the biggest jumps that they built. And that was when I first met Leanne Pelosi. And that was like when I first got to ride with Hana Beaman. She was riding with Hardingham at the time. And I was like, oh, she's so cool. And that was kind of the era of Dustin Craven when he was just starting to come on the scene, and TJ Schneider, he was riding, and I had been riding with them in Calgary. So I kind of like latched onto whatever they were doing and I just kind of rode with them, and I didn't get tapped out.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you're competing, I would think, than anything that's going on while you're in college.
Yeah.
When you finish, is it straight back to Whistler?
No, I actually moved to Golden, BC in the winter time. I started doing school in the spring and the summer and the fall instead of sacrificing my whole winter after I think I did winters at University of Calgary for 2 years, like the regular school program. And then I was like, I can work this system. Fall classes, I'd take like a full course load and only work like one job so I could actually balance everything and then take the whole winter off. And I actually moved out to Golden and lived with Ashley Barker. She was just starting to start shooting. And that was where we like linked up with some guys. And one of them was my boyfriend at the time. He took me sledding on his sled. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the best thing ever.
I'm doing it.
Yeah, I'm doing it. That's definitely what it was like. I'm like, this is so cool. And then I actually started shooting in the backcountry with Ashley. Not really filming quite yet. I was just kind of riding. And I told you I had met Leanne, and then she had actually come back to Lake Louise, which was kind of my stomping grounds at the time, to do MGT snowboard camp. And I was in a big air that day, and her and Susie Davis, who rode for Monix, if anybody remembers that brand.
I don't.
I think it was more of a Canadian brand, but anyway, they were in the big air, and Susie won, and Leanne, or maybe Leanne won. Susie got second, I got third, and then we went and met up with them after, and they were like, hey, do you want to coach with our camp? And I was like, oh my God, this is the coolest. There's like all these cool snowboarder girls, and they're inviting me to be part of their crew. I'm so stoked.
This is a pivotal time for you. This month or so when you're talking about the big air contest and shooting your first time, there's like a 3-month period I feel like that changes your career. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you meet Leanne.
Mm-hmm.
She has a spot on a trip that's open, and she ends up calling you and saying, hey, we've got a spot.
Like, we met each other before, and she saw me snowboard once. So there was a moment there too. There was moments leading up to it, but I was in Golden, and she called me, and she had just started Runway Films, and it was their first movie, La La Land. And she and Tara Dikitis and I think it was Jana Mayan were coming to Golden, but Jana bailed, and they were short a rider. And keep in mind, Tara was like my idol. Absolutely. That was when Tara was like the it girl. Just having her in my town was a big deal,
Right.
Let alone Leanne going, hey, we have a spot on a trip. Do you think you'd be interested in coming with us? And I'm going, are you kidding me? Like, I was almost speechless on the phone, and I was supposed to work my bar job in Calgary, and I phoned them. I was like, yes, I'll be there. I'm coming on the trip. Click. Pick up the phone my employer. I was like, hey, not coming into work. And they're like, you can't just not come into work. And I was like, well, that's what's happening. And they were like, well, you realize you're not going to have a job when you come back if you do that. And I was like, yeah, I realize that. Like, it was so cut and dry, like no questions asked. This is what I'm doing. And so I went on the trip with those girls, and I actually ended up really hitting it off with both of them. Leanne went on another trip. Tara actually invited me to come with her and Buddy, her dog, to Whistler for another few weeks to film with her, which I was kind of like, cannot be real. I'm like pinching myself, like, what?
Shit your pants moment.
Shit my pants moment, yeah. So I actually stayed with Tara in her RV. She had got like a trailer RV, her and Buddy in this trailer, and we went filming in Whistler also after this trip in Golden. And that Golden trip was my first editorial piece with Transworld magazine. It was my first editorial piece, period.
Your first published photo is from that trip?
Yes.
Okay, so that happens. And then you had said you met someone from the camps that invited you to coach at the camps.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that eventually transitions to Argentina, but I feel like around then you could have met somebody that kept you in Argentina for the next 12 summers.
Actually different. The summer before I had linked up with Runway, Leanne, I actually had my friend Carolina Clues, who I went to university with, and she was on the snowboard team with me, and we loved snowboarding together. We snowboarded together. We were a great pair. We actually just decided that we were going to go to Chile and go snowboarding. And we went down there, and we had a friend from Vancouver who rode for West Beach named Jeff Pepperdine. And he was the head coach at this new camp called South America Snow Sessions. And when we got down there, we were like hanging out with some guys from Baker. We rode with them a little bit, and, we stayed in separate places, but we met up with them every day on the mountain kind of thing. And it was really fun. And they were filming a little like movie. Jeremy Dubbs was the filmer. And then we got an email from Jeff Pepperdine with a photo. And the photo was this little K car with 2 small red lights. And we couldn't really like figure out what it was. You could only see like 2 red lights. And then we looked closer at the photo, and the K car was completely buried, and all you could see were the 2 lights at the very top of the car, and that's all you could see. And he's like, you girls need to come here. So we got on a bus the next day. It was a full, I think 48-hour bus ride from where we were, Termas to Chian at the time, up to Santiago, bus transfers over through to Mendoza, another bus transfer to Las Leñas. And we stepped off the bus, and this guy named John Sang Wilbur, I think he's from the Carolinas or North Carolina or New Hampshire. That's the one. He's from New Hampshire. And he's the founder of SAS. He said, you can stay on the couch and you can make sandwiches. And so we made sandwiches for camp, and we stayed on the couch for 2 weeks. And then we went home. And the next summer, he called us up, both of us, and said, hey, do you girls want to come down and coach? Because the camp's growing. We're like, yeah. And that journey started then. And I spent 12 summers, which ended up being SAS Global Travel is what it is now.
So I'm going to take a break real quick. It's time for me to talk about my final set of sponsors. And my next sponsor is Spy Optic. And they have been independent since '94 and taking a playful approach to everything they create. They're killing it on the innovation game this season with their new electrochromic one-lens technology. If you haven't heard about the Ace EC goggle, it packs the power of 3 lenses into one by changing tints with the touch of a button. It's crazy innovation that creates one goggle for any light. It's the best goggle on the market, period. Check out spyoptic.com for all the details on the game-changing EC, as well as their newest athlete signature models and sunglasses. For listening to the show, the good folks at Spy are going to give you 20% off their entire site. When you check out of their site, use the code capital TPM, the number 20, all one word at checkout, and you will get that 20% off. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery based out of Bend, Oregon. They are all about drinking beer outside and supporting snow sports and culture. They really put their money where their mouth is, and this year there's a bunch of projects that prove that. There's the Pray for Snow movie project, which 10 Barrel is the only beer company to ever produce their own ski and snowboard movie. They're also working with Mike Bassich to build a Snowcat mini pub, and they'll have their Hella Big Air contest this year, March 9th at Copper Mountain, March 30th at Mount Bachelor, and there will be one more TBD location and date. So next time you're at the store, make sure you pick up some 10 Barrel and support the beer that supports you. You can find all about the Hella Big Air, the movie tour, athletes, and more over at 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors, and now we'll get back into the podcast. Your riding is focused on the backcountry.
Yeah.
Probably at one point in your career when you're in Whistler, you're like, hey, this contest thing really isn't for me. I'm not that great at it. I might be okay, but I'm never going to be a pro snowboarder in the way that I want to be doing contests. And you focus on the backcountry. In the early days, in 2006, 2007, I would think that snow safety is a totally different experience then than it is today. And what was it like for you in the early days?
Ignorance is bliss.
Was there any planning preparation other than, hey, I've got my beacon?
No planning. I had a beacon. I didn't even know how to use it.
Right, you just had it.
There was actually no point in me having it other than the fact that maybe somebody else could have found me, but I didn't know how to use it. I just wore it because I knew that's what we were supposed to have. But the whole journey with South America Snow Sessions, now SAS Global Travel, I met Skylar Holgate, who was the lead guide at SAS, and he was there at the first year. He was always the leader of the guiding program there in trying to keep everybody safe. And we're still really great friends, and he's still a bit of a mentor for me. And he trained everybody who worked with that outfit how to use your beacon shovel probe and why we're using it and what avalanche terrain is and all this stuff. So that kind of evolved in Argentina.
And you go out on the road with different film crews every year. And have there ever been any trips that you've been on where you have a noticeable weak link?
Yes.
What happens in those situations?
I think we all have to pick up slack where we see it in a way that isn't condescending, but more supportive. One of the biggest things that I've learned in my journey to becoming a guide, which I'm still on that journey, I'm just starting to really get into the meat of it. And that is communication. When people can say, hey, I really don't know what I'm doing, or I don't really know this, it's so great because we can be like, okay, well, let's work on it together. Let's get you kitted for the day. Let's get you like in the know or for the rest of time or whatever, and when we talk about our experience and who's got it and who's not, it is good. We can work together to make a cohesive team and training people, because at this point in my career, I don't really want to go out with anybody who doesn't know how to use all of their equipment and doesn't really understand the terrain that they're in.
It's a waste of your time, I would think, and then puts you in a precarious situation.
It's precarious for them as well.
Yep.
It's very inefficient, unproductive, pretty unsafe. When you don't really understand the physics of the mountain and the snow, it's hard to know what's avalanche terrain and maybe what's not.
Well, I also heard a story about a dude ditching you in the backcountry, and
yeah.
I was hoping you were just going to jump right into it and tell that story, but what happens when you're ditched in the backcountry? How does that even come together?
So that wasn't really a safety. I mean, it is a safety issue, but we weren't really anywhere.
It was more of a weak link, I was thinking, in that respect. If someone's going to leave the team behind, I look at that as a weak link.
Yes. And it wasn't that he didn't know how to use his avalanche gear, which I actually think that he didn't. But Leanne and I were out filming, and I'm not going to name names because since then he's really apologized and made it very clear that he was a rookie and he really didn't know. And we've had a lot of good conversations about it, and we're all good,
Yeah.
But it's a funny situation. We went in the backcountry and we blew a belt on one of our sleds. And this is another thing. It's you got to know how to fix your sled.
They always break.
Yeah, this is the moment where Leanne and I couldn't figure out how to change the belt. We couldn't remember which tool to use on that sled. They were old sleds, so it wasn't super straightforward like it is now. And we couldn't figure out which tool to use. And this guy's like, hey, I gotta go. I'm not really helping you guys at all. And we're like, what do you mean? We seriously can't move this sled. And he was like, I actually don't know anything about sleds. I can't really help you girls. So I'm out. And he just left. And we kind of were like, okay, bye. Beat it, And then we actually saw Matt Belzil, and I think it was maybe Rusty Ockenden, and they were cruising past, but they were so far away. We were yelling and screaming and waving our arms, and they didn't see us. And we were like, shit, okay, well, it's kind of late. We're going to have to figure this out because we can't move the sled. Oh no, it was something else. We didn't blow a belt. We blew an engine.
Oh,
the sled wouldn't start. And so we were like, okay, well, the sled seized. We can't move it. We got to take the belt off. And we couldn't figure out how to get the belt off because with the belt on, it doesn't move. But if you take the belt off, you can tow the sled. Okay, so Leanne and I figure out that we're not going to get this belt off. And it's a good thing that we're strong females, and we pulled it off somehow miraculously. And this is at 3:00 in the afternoon. The sun goes down pretty early, and we're going, oh my God, what are we going to do? And so Leanne gets on the broken sled. We tie it to my sled, and I'm driving, and she's behind on the sled, no power, but the sled is moving now. And I towed her through powder. We're towing through the backcountry in no trails. And it was miraculous that we even made it back to the trail. We tried to tow it up the hill, but the sled was too heavy for the amount of power that we had.
Right.
And so we're like, okay, well, maybe if you jump off, because if you just are dragging a sled, the sled can't steer. You have to steer it.
Yeah.
So we devised this plan where we were going to tow it full speed. And then as soon as we got to the bottom of this hill where we were going to lose the most momentum because of the uphill incline, Leanne was going to jump off the sled and I was going to just pin it to the top. And so we did this. We pinned it on the trail. Leanne jumps off. I'm watching her Superman to Sonic the Hedgehog into the powder on the side of the trail. And I just pin it, and we literally made it by the skin of our teeth to the top. And we're cheering at the top, yeah, we made it. And we got out and we got the sled out. And then we called the producer and we were like, hey, that filmer ditched us in the backcountry. You can't just leave people back there. It's real. Something could have gone sideways. He could have gotten lost. We could have froze to death. There's a lot of things that could have happened. It didn't happen. Yes, he left us in the backcountry and he was the weakest link that day for sure.
Okay. So that's an interesting story. And thinking of interesting stories, you told a lot of them with PS and with Hana and that production. But there's one year, I think, where you ended up filming with the standard crew and they ended up sending the footage elsewhere. And that was a different year for you. And what happens when you go out with a crew that you're not familiar with? Because I hear that was a different experience as well.
Well, it wasn't actually a crew I wasn't familiar with. Leanne was filming with standard. I went out with them one day. She was like, oh, do you want to come on the crew? There was like nobody on it. And I'm like, ooh, opportunity to film with standard? Hell yeah.
Yeah.
This is after Runway Films has done their second film, See What I See. And I didn't really have a filming opportunity. And I was just kind of like, sure, yeah, I'll go out, whatever. And we were hitting a jump. And the filmer that day, I guess he was stoked on what I was doing. He phoned standard and just told them like, hey, like maybe we should try and film with Robin too. And so they phoned Amber Stackhouse, who was my team manager, and Amber kicked down some funds for me to film with standard. And I ended up filming with Leanne for the bulk of that season. But it was a really good year for me. It was a reality check, you know, like I was trying a lot of stuff and I wasn't landing. That's the gist of it. At the very beginning of my snowboard backcountry life, and that's just how it goes. You have to spend the time to learn how to land. And I wasn't quite there. They said there was a lot of almost. I think if we had like one or two more lands, we could have made something good, but we just didn't. But it was great because I ended up working with Peep Show and all of my footage went there. And that was a really amazing experience too. And yes, I made it into the standard TV show, but I didn't make it into the movie.
Was that a big disappointment?
No, it wasn't.
Part of the game?
At the time, I think I probably felt really disappointed in myself. But it was also a good realization that sometimes you can't just send yourself if you can't land. You need to do stuff that you can land if you want to get shots. And I was just like sending it. I was like, whatever, like I was learning. And eventually I did start to land, but it wasn't that year. I did land some stuff and that stuff went into Peep Show. And it was great because Peep Show was kind of had more of like an urban feel to it. And they had a little bit of backcountry like weaved in. So that was great. And then I ended up going on tour with them in Europe and I hung out with Laura Hadar and Colin Quigley and Desiree. And it was great. Marie Huckle, June Bonjan and Estera Preda, they did the movie. So it's part of your journey. You're not always going to kill it.
And then I would say one of the most rewarding projects that you've been a part of is teaming up with Leanne and Full Moon. And that one, it's an all-girls snowboard movie, a really fun movie in general. Just the vibe after you watch it, you kind of have a smile on your face. And I think that's the difference between girls and guys too, is guys are situational and they're one-track mind focused and they can't get out of that zone where it seems like girls can have fun in any situation. Be serious when you need to be serious, but there's a lot more laughter and fun being had. And that's my perception on it. Do you see it that way as well?
Oh, definitely. And I think there's other things that play there too. It's not just like a bunch of girls getting together and doing a film. I had filmed with Hana Beaman for almost 3 years doing PS, and we had made intervals, and I had filmed with Leanne during runway days. And during this whole time, I had been on trips with Marie France, and I had been on trips with Helen Scatini, and I hadn't really worked with Annie much, but we were friends. I actually lived with her. This is where what I was talking about before kind of comes into play. Full Moon was a product of not being included. At that point, nobody was inviting any of us to be a part of any projects. And so we kind of just looked at each other and went, well, we're all really good friends. Isn't it high time we work together? And Leanne, of course, being the producer that she is like, yep, let's do it. We met and we had tea one day, all of us, the entire cast minus Jamie and Elena. And we just said, hey, we're all doing backcountry snowboarding. We've all been doing different projects. At this point in time, none of us were invited to do anything.
Okay.
And so we kind of looked to each other and we're like, well, let's just create our own opportunity. It wasn't like we set out to make an all-girls film.
Well, I see the inclusion part there. I mean, if all of you are all badasses and don't have a company to film with, that's a problem. And the way to solve it is to create your own project.
Yeah, and like that's the business part that we were talking about before. It's like if you aren't offered an opportunity, you better get your butt in gear and make an opportunity.
And that one for you was huge. You won Video Part of the Year. I sat through that long speech of yours, which was really the longest speech at the award show.
It was.
And that's huge for you. When you get invited to an award show like that, do they give you a big hint like, hey, we really want you to come here because you're nominated for this award?
I had been to the Trans World Snowboarding Awards before as a spectator, and just being nominated for me was an enormous accomplishment. I was so proud of myself in that moment that I didn't care if I won or not. But I knew that going into Full Moon, I was like, okay, this is my opportunity to like send it to the moon, like make the most effort, go out every single day. And I did. I literally went out every opportunity that I went. Even if it was shitty, I was out there. Didn't care. I was like, I'm going to just grind so hard for these 2 years, because that was one of my big goals, is I really wanted to like achieve something tangible that it was like an award. Because growing up watching Trans World and Snowboarder too, it's like they have these awards, and to win an award was just like the recognition from the industry that we see you. And like a lot of the girls that I work with, Leanne, Hana, Marie, Annie, they all have their like Trans World awards. And I wanted one so bad. I so badly wanted to be at that level where I had one of those, which is like such a narcissistic thing. You know, you're like selfishly going to this award, and people are always like, oh, you got to do it for yourself. I am doing it for myself, and I am doing it for the love of snowboarding. And it doesn't matter the recognition I get from other people, but it does feel good. And so even to get nominated, I was like, I'm going.
It is cool to win something.
It is cool.
Especially when you're not someone who wins things, because that's not your area of snowboarding. So to get this by your peers in the magazine and the readers, that's a big deal. And it should mean a lot.
It was a big deal. And especially to be nominated next to Kimi Fasani and Jess Camara. Like, to me, I wasn't quite at their level. And to me, this was like the self-reassurance, you know, because you're always like, am I good enough? Am I doing well enough? Am I snowboarding well? Like, you just never know, because you're your own worst enemy when it comes to looking at what you're doing. And you're always like, oh, that thing sucked, or this thing sucked. And I really didn't know. But that to me was like the proof in the pudding that like I was getting somewhere. I was like moving up, and I was like, yes, I'm so excited, you know, just to be included in that roster of Video Part of the Year. I was going to show up in a brand new jacket, and like I went and bought a fur jacket.
Whoa, real fur?
No, not real fur. I'm not really into that. I love animals too much, but I bought this faux fur jacket. Like, I bought this like swanky suit, and I was like, yes, I'm doing it. I'm showing up like I should show up. As if I was going to win. I'm going to show up as if I'm going to win. And if I don't, that's cool too.
I guess the next big thing is depth perception. We talked about it a little bit in the beginning of the podcast. And I would say this is probably a bigger production than anything that you've been a part of. I mean, it seems like anything that Travis Rice is a part of is a huge production and a big success. And was it a big production, and does it put more pressure on you going into something like that?
Yeah. Yes, it does put more pressure on you for sure. But yes, it was the biggest production I had ever been involved in. And secondly, yes, it was a lot of pressure being the first female to be involved in a Travis Rice movie. You know, I like idolize him. He's just an incredible snowboarder, and I just like think he's awesome. I think he's great. Anyway, so I'm idolizing this guy, and he's like doing all these amazing movies, which I love. And then the next thing you know, he sits you down at Baldface. I'm at Baldface during the avalanche course. No, I was guiding there at the time. I'm a tail guide at Baldface part-time. And I was tail guiding a trip, and he was like, hey, can I talk to you for a minute? And I actually thought he was going to give me shit about something. And I was like, oh God. He's like, hey, would you be interested in being involved? He's like, I know that like you've been working so hard on your like avalanche education, and like I really feel like you're going to be an asset to our team. I couldn't even like hear the words. I was like, this is not real. And I was like sweating so much. I was on a leather chair, and I thought I was going to like slip off the chair. Like, my hands were like so clammy, and I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And yeah, he asked me to be a part of the film, and he was like, yeah, do you think you'd be interested? And I was like, what do you mean? Of course I'm interested. It was kind of a moment where I stopped and paused because I'm like, is he serious? And yeah, it was a really big production. And, anything that Travis does, he does it well. He's a total pro. And we talk about the business. This guy is so good at the business. He is working his ass off, building pieces of his own and working with production companies and making a whole line of outerwear.
He's a machine.
Business genius, yeah. And then on top of it, he's insanely talented. And it was very different going from Full Moon, where we had 1 or 2 filmers at times, to the production crew was bigger than the cast.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a different change. And is it weird? You have your boyfriend on that trip with you, and that gives you everything that you like in the world at your fingertips almost. Is that weird at all?
You know what? Austin and I had just started dating. And at first I was like, whoa, we're going on this trip together. So cool. And he had just signed with Quicksilver. And he ended up being my absolute rock during that project because there was an element of pressure. I was really, really hard on myself because, I'm comparing myself to everybody else who's on that trip. And if you look at the cast, Brian Fox, insanely talented, Austin, insanely talented, and then Travis, and I was really comparing my snowboarding to their snowboarding and trying to keep up with the guys, that was my mindset.
Right.
And I really was struggling with it because I was trying stuff that was pretty I was trying gnarlier stuff and I wasn't necessarily landing a lot. And these guys land all the time, everything.
Right.
So when you compare yourself to that, I went into this deep, dark hole where I was like, oh my God, I suck. I'm not getting any footage. This is really bad. I don't know why I'm here. And then there's Austin shaking me, literally shaking me at my shoulders, being like, Robin, snap out of it.
Wow.
You're here because you're a good snowboarder. And I'm like, am I? And he kind of talked me off the ledge a few days when I had some good days and I had some bad days. One day I would get an amazing shot that I was super stoked on and I was like, back up, here I am, back up. And then the next day I wouldn't land anything and I'd be way back down. And he was imperative to that project for me because he really helped me change my perspective, because he would be like, stop comparing yourself to everybody else. You are Robin and you're here because you deserve to be. Just snowboard like you want to snowboard, having fun and just snowboarding and doing my best and just being who I was and not trying to be one of the guys.
Yep.
And that was a pivotal point because it really came into fruition in the second half of that project where I actually started to shine and really step into my own shoes. And it was a really big moment for me in my own snowboarding where I kind of realized that I'm not Travis, I'm not Brian, I'm not Austin, I'm Robin. And Robin snowboards differently than everybody else. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to snowboard like Robin, not like anybody else.
And you found love along the way.
Yeah. We were already in love.
Well, I thought it was really early.
It was really early, yeah. But when you know. Right when Austin and I started dating, we were instant best friends. And I just loved his energy. And he was so positive. And I'm also a very optimistic, positive person. But at times I have this roller coaster, and so he really brings me up and has really helped me learn a lot about myself and actually improved the way I snowboard quite a bit, because now I snowboard as Robin. I don't snowboard as trying to be somebody else, trying to be Hana, trying to be Leanne, trying to be Annie, trying to be Travis, trying to be Brian. It's it was a good realization, and he has taught me a lot about being myself in snowboarding. And now I can say confidently that that's who I am now. And that's everything that you see is me snowboarding as Robin and not me trying to be anybody else.
Well, that is awesome. And it seems like it took a long time to get to that point, but it took true love to make it happen. And then the last thing I'll talk about here is last season you filmed with TGR, and I look at them more as a ski movie company than a snowboard movie company. They'll have a segment with Jeremy Jones, but his brothers own the company. Is it the same working with the crews at TGR as it is with your snowboard crews, or is it different?
It was very similar to the depth perception production level.
A lot more cameras, a lot more people?
A lot more cameras, not necessarily a lot more people. I mean, TGR, they have been making films for so long that they have it absolutely dialed. They know exactly what they're doing. They have people in the office doing all of the groundwork for you so you can show up and focus on snowboarding and not focus on where are we going to stay tonight? Who's going to pay the bill for this? Who's going to are we splitting this? And the machine is well oiled, is how I would like to talk about it. They are absolute pros at what they do. And I actually tried to film for TGR about 7 years ago, and I couldn't quite get the budget to do it because I just hadn't really proven myself at the time. I had some groundwork to do.
Yep.
And it came up last year, and I kind of seized the opportunity. And yes, they predominantly are in ski, but they have a really good snowboard cast, even if it's small. And it goes back to the whole thing about women and men and us just being humans. It's skiing and snowboarding and all of us just being humans, being in the mountains. And I don't really care. I was a little bit hesitant, like, oh, I'm going to be working with a bunch of skiers. How is that going to translate into core snowboarding? Are people going to hate it? I don't know. But it was a natural partnership. They needed another woman and they needed more snowboarders. And I was doing that for them. And I brought a lot to the table and they brought a lot to the table for me. It was like a really good partnership. I loved working with them. They were great. Yeah.
Well, I am going to end this show with a segment I call Inappropriate Questions.
Oh,
yeah.
Fun.
And I get someone that you know to ask you inappropriate questions. I'm not even going to say her name here. I'll say it afterwards, but you'll probably hear her voice, and here we go. You know Robin well. You can probably pronounce her name. How do you pronounce it?
It's Robin Van Gin. Not Van Zine, like Travis said at one point.
Do you have something very inappropriate to start off Inappropriate Questions?
I have some very important questions I'd like to ask. I think they're inappropriate. Maybe they're not as inappropriate as they should be, but I kind of have been wondering, why haven't you been showing your booty the last few years as much as you had in the past? I feel like you've been denying the world your big, beautiful booty, and people want to see it, and I want to know why.
So Hana Beaman's the one asking the questions, and there you go. What do you have to say about the booty question?
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it was kind of always my signature move. Like even growing up in high school, I do the drive-by moon, pull down your pants and stick your butt out the window.
Do you ever press ham?
Oh yeah, so many times. So many times. I don't know. Everybody started doing it. And I think I remember somebody giving us shit for showing our butts. To me, it was just a way to make people laugh, but it felt like I was showing my ass to get, likes or attention, or that's how it made me feel.
Okay.
And I was like, oh God. But I'm going to go back and start mooning again because that is my signature move. And I feel like I'm not really complete without it. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. I mean, what kind of snowboarder that Robin has to be, and it has to be Robin. And I guess that should be what kind of person Robin should be, too. You don't have to keep anything away because of what people think. Just do what you like doing.
I just like the reactions I get from people. You can't not laugh. It's not a sexy thing. It's not at all. It's not supposed to be sexy. It's supposed to be funny. And it is funny.
It's funny every time.
It's funny every time.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now we'll go to question number 2.
Would you rather have to make out with Donald Trump but be able to heliboard for the rest of your life for free in the best conditions? Or would you rather make out with Austin but only get to ride icy street rails for the rest of your life?
So that's an amazing question. We haven't had a would you rather like that. And we haven't had a would you rather involving making out with our president to have perfect heliboard conditions every single day of your life. Or you stick with what you know, your boyfriend, Austin Sweeten, and you ride bulletproof shit for the rest of your life. What would you do there?
Donald Trump.
Wow.
Austin would forgive me. And also, it doesn't even have to be heliboarding. Just the fact that it was icy bullshit for the rest of my life was the kicker there. I was like, oh, I can't do that. I'd have a quick makeout, no strings attached. Austin would totally understand, and then we could go ride POW.
Was your question that you had to make out with them every day, or was it just once? I can't even remember.
I mean, you guys didn't say every day.
Okay. But if it was every day, you might have to think about it a little bit more.
That'd be harder.
Well, I will go with our third and final inappropriate question.
Okay.
How much would it take for you to never snowboard again and just be a lifestyle/stunt rider person?
First, will you give the definition of lifestyle/stunt person?
I don't know. I guess if I still got to do stunts, that'd be pretty cool. But I don't know if I'd want to be like a lifestyle, like snowboard model. I feel like my soul would be crushed. Everything I stand for would be crushed. It would take a lot. Couple mil.
Well, that's not too much.
Yeah. It wouldn't be the worst, like there could be worse things.
You could be making out with Donald Trump every day.
Exactly. I'm not making out with Donald Trump. I mean, not that bad. I feel like the question was not even inappropriate.
No, it really wasn't inappropriate, and I could have probably spun it a different way. But you know what? We've been going for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
I want to thank you for your time. Your career has been an awesome one, especially since starting at 16, which is very rare in these worlds to make it to where you have. And It's quite an accomplishment. And I'm sure you have an amazing smile because of your dentist family. Don't know why I'm throwing that in there. But thank you for your time, and I'll talk to you soon.
Hey, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me and let me just talk your face off.
So that was time with Robin Van Gyn. She has had a long career in snowboarding, but it's funny. Listening to her interview, it sounds like it took a film trip with Travis Rice and the support of her boyfriend Austin Sweeten to really realize who she was as a snowboarder. It's crazy to me that you can be so good for so long and not really realize who you are as an athlete until you're put into one of the more high-pressure situations of your career. But that's what happened with Robin. The awesome thing about Robin is she defines what being a human is. I feel like if this interview was transcribed and I took the gender parts out of it, you wouldn't know if Robin was a guy or a girl. And for some reason, that's really cool to me. So it was awesome talking to Robin Van Gyn. If you like this podcast or any of the ones I've done, please give me a review on iTunes. It helps the show grow, and it's really appreciated. What you need to do is go to iTunes or Apple Podcasts, search for the Powell Movement, click the logo, scroll down to where you see the stars, click 5 stars, and you're done. It's that easy. Thanks for doing it, and thanks for listening. Finally, this show doesn't happen without great sponsors, and I have some amazing ones. They are Evo, Rescue Water, Outdoor Research, Spy Optic, and the 10 Barrel Brewery. Have a great week, everyone.